It's like there's nothing there, but it's like an alleyway, right? So it's an alleyway, and it's like in between two shops. So just you'll see it. There's be signs out front. Don't worry. It looks like an alleyway, but there's a radio station in the back. We promise. Fantastic. Hello, caller. What is your name and where are you calling from?
Hey, this is Trae Smith calling from LA.
Fantastic. Thank you, Trae, for calling in and spend some time with us this night to talk about things. How's everything going for you right now?
Yeah, well, right now, I just graduated from Pepperdine in August with my MBA. Working right now and trying to make the most of everything. How are you guys doing?
Hanging in.
Good. This is Isabel. I've been messaging you, so thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, hey, I'm glad to be here. Thanks.
I just wanted to know, I looked at some of your recent LinkedIn things. What was it like knowing as a high school student that you could do so much with your football potential? You could pretty much go wherever you wanted to go.
Yeah, I mean, so like when I was in high school, like I really knew that I could play anywhere. Oftentimes I would like probably switch like what school I wanted to play at. Like I'd be like, oh, I want to go to this school if they won, or this other school if they won. But I mean, for the most part, I just tried to just like practice a lot. I think that was what led to my confidence. Like I would just practice every day and I would throw the ball like as much as I could. And I'd have my football every day at school. I'd throw it around campus. And then like after school, I would just literally just throw the ball like every single day. That was like what I did. And I just felt really good. And then I would just compete. And whenever I had the ball in my hands, I would like try to score a touchdown. And yeah.
Yeah, you had a pretty good record in high school. I looked at it earlier. That was crazy. But you did decide to go to Santa Monica City College after high school, right?
Yeah, I did. I did end up going to Santa Monica after high school. Like I said before, when I was throwing the ball earlier, like every single day, I was throwing the ball more than I was studying. So that is kind of why I had to go to community college after. But it was like a really big wake-up call for me academically, which eventually led me to transferring a few years later.
And what was that process like, you know, going to a JUCO and then eventually, you know, becoming a receiver at UCLA?
Yeah, so the process at JUCO, I kind of went in thinking like, oh, it's just JUCO. I'm going to go in and be the guy. Sorry, it's my dog barking. It's got a puppy. I kind of went in like, I'm going to go into JUCO. It's just JUCO. Like, I'm hot stuff. I'm supposed to go D1. It's going to do whatever. And I got to JUCO, and it almost felt like a university at Santa Monica because we were like one of the better divisions and one of the better schools. So there were multiple quarterbacks, multiple of like every position, so much different than high school, whereas like I was the starter, I had a backup, and he was like, of course, the backup. And then at Santa Monica, there was like 5 quarterbacks. So I was like, whoa, this is so different. And then like some guys would transfer, some guys would stay at the college. So I would just kind of like do a lot of observing like that. And then I would see like in the games, just kind of like there was a higher drive of guys who wanted to transfer them in high school. So then like I had that part, and then trying to transfer to UCLA as a walk-on was a difficult journey. I had done a lot of outreach to the coaches, and then eventually came to an agreement where they already had their guy with Josh Rosen, and I would play receiver mostly. And I said okay to that.
That's awesome. Did you have to try out when you were walking on, or was there an agreement before?
So that's what made the walk-on process somewhat difficult, is because at the time they weren't doing tryouts. Like UCLA football does not do tryouts, unlike other universities where like I know in the SEC, like University of Florida and Alabama, like they have a day where like students who are enrolled can come in and try out, whereas UCLA doesn't do that. You have to be invited or be like a scholarship player. So that made it difficult. So really it was I just kept on messaging Coach Moore after I was told the roster was full, and I just kept on messaging him until he eventually let up. And I got my student ID number and I gave it to him. And then, I became a Bruin after that.
That's awesome. So you just commented about being a Bruin. I know that there's like a huge rivalry between UCLA and USC, obviously. Growing up in Southern California at the age of like 7, I had no idea what it was, but I knew that UCLA and USC were rivals. But what was that like? What was the rivalry like when you were there?
The rivalry felt stronger, definitely when I was there. USC was really good. Just like going into that week, it felt like a very special week whenever we played. Like we'd have our other regular season games, and of course we would prepare as hard as we could for those. But going into USC, it was like a special week, and the rivalry was very strong, and I think it'll always be strong every year.
It'll always be stronger, you said?
Yeah, I think like every single year that rivalry is only going to get stronger, and that's what keeps the rivalry great. It's just the tension of who's the better school in LA, but we all know it's UCLA. But that's how it is.
They're playing, I think, this weekend. Who do you have winning?
I have UCLA winning for this week with UCLA versus USC. We just got this Jordan deal too. That made the news, Jordan and Nike. So I think the guys are going to be super amped up knowing that you no longer have to wear Under Armour. The guys seem really happy about that. So I think they're going to show it this weekend.
That's really cool.
And as your time as a walk-on, not everybody really understands what that's like. They see like, okay, yeah, if there's a blowout, you might get in, you might play. But from your perspective, how much work does a walk-on have to put on compared to the starters, and as far as benefits? Because I think people are still kind of hazy about that, in 2020.
Yeah, so for walk-ons and scholarships, it's an equal amount of time put into the sport, like every week, regardless if you're a walk-on or a scholarship player. We're all on the field at 5:30. We're all doing lifts, going to team meeting before class, after class, team dinner. Like everyone has the same requirements. However, scholarship players are able to get monthly stipends and have housing paid for, tuition paid for, and get like a weekly allowance for food on campus. So, and whereas walk-on players, I walked on, I paid for my housing. I didn't have a meal card. I had an apartment. I cooked in my apartment. Like it was like a different lifestyle between the two. And whereas like starters would get like called up to do certain activities during practice, whereas like walk-ons, you would just kind of like have to watch. But there is definitely like an equal opportunity. I feel if you were a walk-on at your designated position, if you wanted to play there, it was you had a fair shot, but you were just given less reps.
And on the academic side, because you see a lot of walk-ons, grad transfers, they take full advantage of that academically. Some guys, they might play and they're a 6-year senior, but that was because of injury or whatever. But in your case, how do you feel like you took the most advantage out of your time as a walk-on academically?
I took probably the most advantage academically, I'd say, out of anyone on the team. For instance, my junior year, we had a program that was called Career Prep for Development for the student athletes on the football team, and we had these workshops about twice a month to get us internships. And every week that we had them, every time we'd go in, guys on the team would say, "Trae, can you not raise your hand so many times?" And I'm like, I'll raise it some more today just because. So, like, I was super engaged into it, and I kind of saw that I was that receiver. I was like, I'm not a receiver. I play quarterback. I just kind of saw the way things were going. I was like, I'm graduating in a year. Let me set myself up for success just in case I don't play on the Rams or Patriots who just played tonight. So I got an internship through the UCLA football program at Oppenheimer. That's where I started in private wealth management. We were also given like these peer mentors who were students at UCLA who could be tutors. I took advantage of my first season on the team with an academic counselor on the football team who helped me create like a study schedule. And I would just have these biweekly meetings with her and check in and just make sure I was staying on top of my like study plan. So I would take advantage that way. And then also you'd get priority enrollment because we were student athletes. So I would like enroll early, make sure I had the classes I wanted that had the right schedule. So I think academically walking on it was a really good move to go to UCLA, just looking outside of football.
Did you guys have like a minimum GPA that you had to be on the team?
My GPA was I was on the athletic director's honor roll every quarter I was on the team. So we never really talked about guys who had low GPAs. I mean, again, to be on the team, there was no tryouts. And if you had to be invited as a walk-on, which meant you fit the criteria, and then scholarship guys, they had to maintain their certain threshold. So because we were like an academic-heavy school, that's probably why we lose recruits to some of these bigger football schools who have more lenient academic requirements to enter the school. That was one thing that was in the way, but for the most part, the guys on the team kept up a pretty good GPA.
And with what you're doing now, how do you feel like you would connect that back to, football, or do you feel like that's a part of your life that's just over and you're more of a spectator now?
I mean, I definitely still can play. Like, I don't know if there's an NFL team or coach or scout listening to this, but if he is, I can definitely still play. I can still throw the ball like 70 yards, still fast. I still I could probably run somebody over. But now that I am still kind of actively wanting to play, in the meantime, I got my MBA over these past 18 months since I graduated. Right now, I'm studying to go to law school too. So, like in the meantime, I'm doing my thing outside of football, just kind of like how I did while I was in college. I would do football, and then when I wasn't doing football, I'd prepare myself for success outside of it.
And kind of going back to high school, you think about talk about rivalries and overcoming things. Narbonne for a while, they pretty much were running the city section. Birmingham, they had that comeback this year, and even though Narbonne was banned from the playoffs, how was that rivalry between you and Narbonne, let's say San Pedro, when you were coming up? How intense was that?
The rivalry was very intense. I mean, San Pedro and Narbonne were like two of the top schools at that time when I was in high school, and that's kind of similar to like the UCLA USC thing. It was like those three schools, like us competing, was like a really big deal, and it kind of seemed like if you could beat Narbonne, you could beat San Pedro, and whoever to kind of win all their games really was, I guess, kind of like the winner of the city.
And in regards to just what, law school and everything that you got planned ahead, what do you pretty much, how do you feel about, the upcoming year and, your plan for what you got going?
My plan for 2021, I mean, just going in, of course, you have some uncertainty with this profound crisis going on, COVID-19, and stuff being closer in LA. But I still, like, what I learned at UCLA football, Coach Mora would always tell us to sharpen our sword silently. So, like, while there's uncertainty, I'm still sharpening my sword. So, like, either way, I'm like, whatever happens, I'm doing what I have to. Like, applications are due in a couple months. Taking the LSAT next month. I'm just like still doing what I have to do. I'm still kind of treating my steps and my plan as accordingly. This crisis, of course, affects like being outdoors and stuff like that. But I focus more on like what I can do as opposed to what I can't do, and that's been keeping me busy. And
for parting advice, what would you give to these high school graduates, these college graduates in this moment?
High school and college, or both?
Both, yeah.
I will tell high school kids, anyone who's coming out of high school right now who's in my shoes, had to go to community college. I'm gonna tell them right now, like, don't care what people say. Like, I have some teammates, even some coaches, who are like, "Hey, man, playing football at UCLA is gonna be a far stretch for you coming from a JUCO." There's always gonna be naysayers. Like, don't care about them. Like, let them. Like, if anything, like, be glad that if you have naysayers, be glad. Because that means that you're the one who's being confident and actually going after your dreams. The people who are talking down on you, they're not